The cardboard box trembled in Raymond Clark's hands as he walked through the scorching afternoon heat. 42 years old, single father, fired this morning for saving the wrong patient. Inside his wallet, $12 remained, just enough for Dylan's dinner, not enough for the bus ride home. 10 miles stretched ahead under the merciless sun. His phone screen had been shattered for weeks, the cracks spreading like the fractures in his carefully built life. He was calculating whether pasta or rice would keep his 8-year-old son full longer when the sound ripped through the air. A deafening roar that made the ground shake beneath his worn leather shoes. 2 massive helicopters descended from the sky, wind whipping debris into chaos, people scattering in panic. The doors burst open. Men in emergency medical uniforms jumped out, scanning the crowd with desperate urgency. Then one of them pointed directly at him and shouted words that made no sense. "Where's the doctor? Where's Dr. Raymond Clark?" 4 hours ago, he wasn't worth keeping. Now they're hunting him down with helicopters. What changed? And why does the man stepping forward look like he's been searching for Raymond his entire life? The morning had started like any other Tuesday at Memorial Grace Hospital. Raymond scrubbed his hands with methodical precision, the watch on his wrist, Lisa's last gift before the cancer took her, catching the light. The elderly woman on the table, Mrs. Patterson, had been wheeled in with a massive brain hemorrhage. 73 years old, no insurance, no family. Every other surgeon had refused. Too risky, not worth the liability. But Raymond had seen a fighting chance. The surgery was in its critical phase when the doors burst open. Dr. Harrison, the hospital director, strode in, his face red with anger. "Dr. Clark, I need you to stop immediately. We have a VIP case that requires this operating room." Raymond's hands never stopped moving, his eyes fixed on the delicate vessels he was repairing. His voice remained steady. "I'm saving a life here, Director. Your VIP can wait 30 minutes. Harrison's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "That VIP is Senator Bradford's son. He's scheduled for a cosmetic procedure that was booked weeks ago. This hospital runs on relationships, Clark, on money." Raymond's jaw tightened, but his hands remained steady. "My priority is the woman whose brain is exposed on this table. She gets to live. That's not negotiable." 27 minutes later, Mrs. Patterson's vitals stabilized. In the scrub room, Raymond opened his locker to find Dylan's photo taped inside, his son's gap-toothed grin, and a drawing labeled, "My Dad Saves People" in crayon. Harrison was waiting outside with a security guard. "Dr. Clark, your employment is terminated effective immediately. You cannot work within the framework of a modern healthcare facility." Raymond's voice remained calm. "You mean I won't let money determine who lives and who dies?" The director handed him a termination letter, already signed. "You have 15 minutes. Raymond packed slowly. Dylan's photo, his medical certificates, thank you cards from patients. One written in a child's handwriting. "Thank you, Dr. Clark, for saving my daddy. Love, Amy, age 6. Colleagues he'd worked beside for 6 years avoided his gaze. He walked out carrying everything that mattered in a cardboard box. Standing in the hospital lobby, Raymond looked up at the 12-story building where he'd spent 6 years building a life. He remembered his first day. Dylan barely 3. Lisa dead only 3 months. Now, at 42, he was starting over. His car had been repossessed 2 months ago when he'd chosen Dylan's school fees over the loan payment. His phone screen was shattered. The app wouldn't load. He checked his wallet. $12.37. The bus would cost $9 round trip. That left $3 for dinner. Dylan had asked for pizza that morning. Raymond had promised, knowing it was a lie. The walk would take him through the industrial district. 10 miles in dress shoes, never meant for hiking. Raymond adjusted his grip on the box and started walking. Sweat soaked through his shirt within the first mile. The leather shoes rubbed against his heels, blisters forming with each step. He thought about Lisa, about how she'd faced her brain tumor with courage, even when they couldn't afford the surgery. The doctors had been apologetic, but firm. Without money, there were no options. That's when he'd made his vow. No one else would die because they couldn't pay. By mile 3, Raymond's throat felt like sandpaper. A convenience store glowed ahead, promising cold water and air conditioning. He stopped at the entrance, feeling the blast of cool air. His hand touched his wallet. $12. If he bought water for $2, that left $10 for Dylan's dinner. Still not enough for pizza. He turned away and kept walking. A bus stop appeared ahead. Raymond sank onto the bench, watching people file onto the arriving bus, seeing their relief at escaping the heat. He could have been on that bus. Could have been home in 20 minutes. But then Dylan would have eaten rice with soy sauce for dinner. Again, Raymond stood and continued walking, his legs protesting with each step. At mile 5, Raymond spotted a payphone outside a gas station. He dialed the school with his last quarter. Dylan's voice came through, bright and eager. "Dad, I got an A on my science project. Mrs. Peterson said it was the best in class. Can you help me with math homework tonight?" Raymond's throat constricted. "That's incredible, buddy. Of course I'll be there. Listen, I'm going to be home a little late tonight. But when I get there, we'll do homework together, and I'll make your favorite dinner." Dylan's excitement returned. "Really? Spaghetti with meatballs?" The words stabbed through Raymond like a knife. "Yes, son, spaghetti with meatballs." Another lie. He had enough money for pasta and cheap sauce. No meatballs. "I love you, Dad." Dylan's voice rang with pure trust. "I love you too, Dylan. More than anything." Raymond hung up and bent over, hands on his knees, trying to breathe through the pain in his chest. He'd just lied to the one person he'd sworn to always be honest with. Tears burned behind his eyes, but he blinked them back. He straightened up, picked up his box, and kept walking. By mile 7, Raymond's vision began to blur at the edges. Dehydration was setting in. His feet were on fire, each step sending sharp pains through his heels, where the blisters had burst. But he kept walking because giving up was unthinkable. A small park appeared. Raymond collapsed onto a bench, finally setting down the box. He opened it, hands trembling, and pulled out the contents. Dylan's photo, his medical license, letters from patients, a small envelope containing Lisa's last letter. He opened it carefully, though he'd read it 1,000 times. Lisa's shaky handwriting. "Raymond, you have a gift. Don't let this world take it from you. Don't let them make you choose between being a good doctor and being a good man. Promise me you'll keep saving people. That's who you are. Dylan needs to see that kind of man. I love you both. Forever. Lisa." Raymond folded the letter, pressing it against his chest. Tears broke through, running hot down his face. He'd kept his promise to Lisa. He'd saved people. He'd refused to compromise. And what had it cost him? Everything. His wife gone. His career destroyed. His son eating cheap pasta while other kids ate pizza. Maybe everyone else was right. Maybe principles were a luxury he couldn't afford. But then he thought about Mrs. Patterson lying on that table. She would have died so someone could get a nose job. Raymond wiped his eyes. No. He'd made the right choice, even if it meant walking 10 miles, even if it meant lying to Dylan. Some things were worth fighting for. Raymond stood, his legs nearly buckling, and picked up the box. 3 more miles. The sun began its descent, painting the sky orange and red. His shadow stretched long beside him. At mile 9, each step required conscious effort. He counted steps when miles seemed too far. 100. Then another. The box felt like it weighed 100 pounds. The familiar streets of his neighborhood finally came into view. Almost home. Almost there. He allowed himself to imagine Dylan's smile, arms outstretched for a hug. That image pulled him forward, step after agonizing step, until he was 2 blocks from their apartment. That's when the sound split the air, a deep, thrumming roar that seemed to come from everywhere. Raymond looked up as 2 massive helicopters appeared over the rooftops, their rotors churning the air into violent spirals. They descended rapidly, emergency lights flashing red and white. People emerged from houses, pointing and shouting, children covering their ears. The helicopters dropped lower, state medical emergency response seals painted on their sides. Wind from the rotors whipped through the street with hurricane force, tearing leaves from trees, sending trash cans tumbling. Raymond stood frozen, unable to process what he was seeing. Both helicopters touched down in the middle of the street, crushing asphalt beneath them. Car alarms shrieked. The emergency lights painted everything in red and white. The doors burst open before the rotors had fully stopped. Men in emergency medical uniforms jumped out, 10, maybe 12, moving with military precision. Doctors in white coats, paramedics, security personnel. They spread out quickly, scanning the crowd with urgent, desperate eyes. One of them cupped his hands around his mouth and shouted, "Where's the doctor? Where's Dr. Raymond Clark?" The name hit Raymond like a physical blow. His name. They were looking for him. The cardboard box slipped from his fingers, spilling its contents across the sidewalk. He stood there, shirt soaked with sweat, face burned from the sun, feet bleeding, staring at the impossible scene. 4 hours ago, he'd been fired. Now, 12 people had arrived in 2 state emergency helicopters shouting his name. The young paramedic spotted him. "There! That's him! Dr. Clark!" A figure emerged from the lead helicopter, a man in his early 60s, silver hair, expensive suit. But his face was raw with terror and desperate hope. He ran toward Raymond, his polished shoes slapping against the asphalt. The man grabbed Raymond's shoulders, his hands shaking. "Dr. Clark, thank God we found you. We've been searching for over an hour." Raymond's mind felt sluggish. The man's grip tightened. "I'm Douglas Wheeler. Governor Douglas Wheeler. I've followed your career for 10 years. Every paper you've published, every technique you've developed, every impossible case you've saved." Governor Wheeler's voice cracked, tears streaming down his face. "My daughter, Melissa. She's 13 years old. Car accident 90 minutes ago. Severe traumatic brain injury with multiple hemorrhages. We've airlifted every top neurosurgeon in 3 states to the state medical center. Every single one looked at her scans and said the same thing. Impossible. Too much damage. Even if they tried, she'd be brain dead." Raymond's professional instincts cut through the fog. Brain injury, multiple hemorrhages, time sensitive. Douglas Wheeler pressed forward. "But I know what you can do. I know about the microsurgical technique you developed, the one you've been trying to get approved for years, the one that uses targeted hypothermia, combined with microscopic vessel reconstruction. Every hospital has rejected it as too experimental. That technique is Melissa's only chance. She has maybe 30, maybe 40 minutes before the bleeding becomes irreversible." The governor dropped to his knees right there in the street. This powerful man who governed millions, kneeling before a fired doctor in ruined shoes. "Her mother. We lost her to cancer 2 years ago. Melissa is all I have left. Please, Dr. Clark, please save my daughter. I'm begging you." The crowd had grown silent. Raymond looked down at the governor kneeling before him, then at the helicopters, then at his own hands. These hands Memorial Grace had deemed not valuable enough. These hands that were apparently a 13-year-old girl's only hope. Raymond's voice came hoarse but steady. "How much time?" Douglas Wheeler looked up. 30 to 40 minutes before irreversible damage, maybe less. Raymond felt his professional mind click into gear, exhaustion falling away. 30 minutes meant they were past the golden hour. This would be the most difficult surgery of his career. He bent down, gathering the scattered contents. He picked up Dylan's photo, looking at that gap-toothed smile. If this were Dylan on an operating table, what would he want? He'd want someone to try, someone to care more about saving his child than about anything else. Raymond tucked the photo into his pocket and looked at Governor Wheeler. Let's go. Every second we waste is brain tissue we can't save. He extended his hand. Douglas Wheeler gripped it like a lifeline, pulling himself up, a sob escaping his throat. The medical team sprang into action, forming a protective circle around Raymond. A paramedic handed him water. Raymond drank deeply as they moved toward the helicopters. They climbed into the passenger compartment, a mobile medical command center with tablets and equipment. Governor Wheeler climbed in after him, followed by 2 physicians and a nurse. The door slammed shut. The pilot's voice crackled. State Medical Center, Priority 1. ETA 18 minutes. The rotors spun faster, and Raymond felt the helicopter lift off. Through the window, he could see his neighborhood shrinking below. The street where he'd walked 10 miles, the apartment where Dylan was waiting. A tablet was thrust into Raymond's hands. These are Melissa's scans, updated 7 minutes ago. Raymond's eyes moved across the screen. The damage was catastrophic. Multiple hemorrhages in temporal and frontal lobes. Severe swelling compressing the brainstem. Any surgeon would understand why others had refused. This wasn't medicine. This was a miracle attempt. Raymond's mind began constructing a surgical approach, identifying the critical path that might give this girl a chance. Douglas Wheeler sat across from him, hands clasped, white-knuckled. Dr. Clark, I need you to understand why I've followed your career so obsessively. I've spent 10 years trying to honor the kind of doctor you are, someone who actually gives a damn about saving lives over saving money. I've pushed legislation to protect doctors who prioritize patient care. I've funded experimental research. I did it because I believe medicine needs more people like you. He looked directly at Raymond, tears running. I never imagined my daughter would be the one who needed a doctor crazy enough to try the impossible. Raymond felt something shift in his chest. I'm not crazy, Governor. I just believe some things are worth fighting for. Douglas Wheeler nodded. That's why you're here. That's why I sent helicopters. Because when my daughter needed a miracle, I needed a doctor who still believes in fighting for people, not profits. The medical center appeared, a massive complex lit up like a small city. The helicopter began its descent toward a rooftop landing pad. Raymond could see people waiting, medical staff, equipment, a gurney. The pilot's voice. Landing in 60 seconds. Raymond handed back the tablet and took a deep breath. This was it. The helicopter touched down. The doors flew open. Raymond stepped out into organized chaos, nurses shouting vitals, residents wheeling equipment. A senior doctor approached. Dr. Clark, I'm Dr. Morrison, Chief of Neurosurgery. Melissa Wheeler is in OR 3. Her vitals are deteriorating. Maybe 25 minutes before irreversible damage. She paused. I've read your papers on hypothermic micro-reconstruction. It's never been approved for human use. Raymond met her gaze. It's never been formally approved, but it's based on sound science, and right now it's the only option that girl has. Dr. Morrison nodded sharply. Then let's do it. I'll assist. They moved rapidly through corridors, Governor Wheeler following behind, his face a mask of terror. In the scrub room, Raymond washed his hands methodically. The ritual felt familiar, comforting. A nurse helped him into surgical attire. He caught his reflection, sunburned face, bloodshot eyes, but his expression focused and determined. He pushed through the doors into operating room 3. The space was packed. And on the table, so small, was Melissa Wheeler. Her head prepped, monitors displaying her vital signs. Her brain pressure was dangerously high and climbing. Raymond moved to the table, his exhaustion evaporating as training took over. All right, listen up. We're going to do something that's never been done before. Induced hypothermia to 32 degrees to slow cellular damage, combined with microscopic vessel reconstruction. I need everyone on their A game because there's no room for error. This girl has a chance only if we execute perfectly. Let's give her that chance. The surgery began. The next 8 hours blurred into focused intensity. Each vessel Raymond repaired was smaller than a human hair. Each suture required the precision of a watchmaker. The room fell into rhythm. Beep of monitors, quiet instructions, instruments passing hand to hand. Raymond worked with absolute concentration, aware of every passing second. At hour 3, a resident whispered, "The hypothermia is actually working." At hour 5, Dr. Morrison murmured, "Your technique works." At hour 7, Melissa's brain pressure began dropping. The swelling was receding. The bleeding had stopped. Hour 8 brought the final stages. Raymond stepped back from the table, his legs nearly buckling. The monitors showed steady vital signs. Strong heartbeat, normal oxygen, brain pressure within range. Dr. Morrison looked at him with reverence. "You did it." Raymond swayed, and a nurse grabbed his arm. "She's not out of danger yet. The next 24 hours are critical. But yes, she has a chance." Raymond walked out of the operating room on legs that barely functioned. The waiting area was packed. Governor Wheeler, security, hospital administrators, half the state government. Wheeler jumped to his feet. Raymond pulled down his mask and smiled. The surgery was successful. Melissa is alive. She has a long recovery ahead, but the damage has been repaired. She's going to make it. Douglas Wheeler collapsed into a chair, his face buried in his hands, shoulders shaking with sobs. Around him, people erupted in applause and tears. Raymond just stood there, swaying, feeling 8 hours of surgery settling into his bones. An aide rushed up with water. Raymond drank in huge gulps. The hospital administrator approached. "Dr. Clark, we would be honored to have someone of your caliber on our staff." Raymond's phone buzzed. A text from Memorial Grace's director. "Dr. Clark, we made a mistake. Please return. Chief of Neurosurgery. Name your salary." Raymond stared at the message. His phone buzzed again. Another hospital. Another offer. And again. Word had spread. The fired doctor who saved the governor's daughter. His head spun. A nurse pressed a sandwich into his hands. "Eat, doctor." Raymond ate mechanically, feeling his blood sugar stabilize. Governor Wheeler finally composed himself. "Dr. Clark, I can never repay what you've done. Never. But I want to try. Whatever you need, whatever you want. It's yours. A position at any hospital. Research funding. Teaching position. Name it." Raymond finished the sandwich. "I need to call my son. I need to tell him I'm okay." The governor pulled out his phone. "Use mine." Raymond took it with trembling hands and dialed. Mrs. Chen answered. Then Dylan's voice, small and anxious. "Dad? Where are you? I'm scared. You said you'd be home by 6:30 and it's almost midnight." Raymond closed his eyes. "I'm sorry, buddy. Dad had an emergency. A girl needed help. But I'm okay, and I'll be home tomorrow, I promise." Dylan's voice strengthened. "Did you save her, Dad?" Raymond smiled through exhaustion. "Yes, son. I saved her." Dylan's voice came through with unshakable faith. "I knew you would. You always save people. That's what you do." Those simple words hit Raymond harder than anything. "I love you, Dylan. More than anything." After Dylan hung up, Raymond sat holding the phone. Governor Wheeler sat beside him. "You walked 10 miles today after being fired, with $12, to get home to your son. I know because we tracked your route." Raymond looked at him in surprise. Wheeler continued. "And now you've performed a surgery that saved my daughter. and every hospital is offering you positions and money. But I have a feeling none of that matters to you. Am I right?" Raymond spoke carefully. "What matters to me is being able to do medicine the right way. Not the profitable way. The right way. Where patient care comes first. Where money doesn't determine who gets treated. Where doctors make medical decisions without administrators overruling them for financial reasons. I don't want a huge salary. I want to help people who need help." Douglas Wheeler studied him, then nodded. "What if you could have exactly that? Not as an employee, but as the director of your own facility. I'll fund it personally. A community neurosurgery clinic where no patient is ever turned away. You'd have complete autonomy, state-of-the-art equipment, and a salary that ensures your son gets pizza whenever he wants it." He smiled slightly. "All I ask is that you keep being exactly who you are, a doctor who gives a damn." Raymond sat back, stunned. His own clinic, complete autonomy. No administrators overruling medical decisions. "Why would you do this?" Wheeler's answer was simple. "Because Melissa is alive. Because you refused to compromise your principles. The medical system needs more doctors like you. If I can create a place where being a good doctor is rewarded instead of punished, then something good comes from the worst day of my life." "Yes," Raymond said simply. "Yes, I'll do it." Governor Wheeler's face split into a genuine smile. They shook hands. Dr. Morrison stepped forward. "If you're taking staff, Dr. Clark, I'd like to be considered. What you did tonight, that's the medicine I want to practice." Hospital staff found Raymond an on-call room. He fell asleep almost immediately. When he woke 6 hours later, sunlight was streaming through the window. He ignored dozens of messages and asked for a ride home, which the governor's security provided. The car pulled up outside Raymond's apartment at 9 in the morning. He climbed out, his feet still painful, his body stiff, but his heart lighter than it had been in years. He took the stairs slowly until he reached his door. His key turned in the lock, and Dylan came running, launching himself at Raymond. "Dad, you're home. You're okay." Dylan hugged him so tightly. Raymond knelt down, wrapping his arms around the boy, breathing in the scent of his shampoo. "I'm okay, buddy." Dylan pulled back. "Mrs. Chen said you were on the news. She said you saved the governor's daughter. She said people are calling you a hero." Raymond smoothed Dylan's hair back. "I just did my job, son. But I need to tell you something." He led Dylan to the couch. "Dad lost his job yesterday. They fired me for making a choice they didn't like. But something good came from it. I'm going to open my own medical clinic, a place where we help people who need help, whether they can pay or not." Dylan processed this, then asked, "Will you be home more?" Raymond felt his throat tighten. "I'll try, buddy. I'll really try." Dylan nodded, satisfied. "Okay." "Oh, Mrs. Chen ordered pizza last night because you were late. We saved you some. Do you want it for breakfast?" Raymond laughed, the sound surprising him with its joy. Pizza for breakfast sounds perfect. They ate cold pizza together, Dylan chattering about his science project and school. Normal things. Beautiful. Normal. Everyday things. Raymond listened to every word, present in a way he hadn't been in months. The fear and exhaustion seemed distant now, replaced by something that felt like peace. Over the next months, Raymond's story spread to national coverage. The doctor, who was fired for saving a life, then saved the governor's daughter, became a headline that prompted conversations about healthcare priorities and medical ethics. Memorial Grace's director called to apologize. Raymond accepted with grace, but declined their offer. Governor Wheeler began establishing the Clark Community Neurosurgery Clinic. Funding was secured, a location identified, a former medical building in an underserved neighborhood, equipment ordered. Dr. Morrison joined as co-director. Applications poured in from medical professionals who wanted to be part of something different, 6 months later, Raymond stood in front of the newly renovated clinic, Dylan at his side, watching as the sign was installed. Clark Community Neurosurgery. No patient turned away. The letters gleamed in the morning sun. Melissa Wheeler, fully recovered, stood nearby with her father, ready to cut the ribbon. Local news crews had gathered, along with neighbors and medical professionals. Governor Wheeler spoke to the crowd. 6 months ago, I learned what true medicine looks like. The best doctors aren't the ones who make the most money. They're the ones who refuse to compromise, who see patients as people rather than profit centers. Dr. Raymond Clark saved my daughter's life. But more than that, he reminded us what healthcare should be: compassionate, accessible, and focused on healing rather than billing. Raymond took the microphone, feeling Dylan squeeze his hand. I'm not a hero. I'm just a doctor who believes healthcare is a calling, not a business. This clinic exists because of Governor Wheeler's generosity, but it represents something bigger, a commitment that no one will ever be turned away because of their ability to pay. We might not be able to help everyone, but we'll never refuse to try. Melissa Wheeler cut the ribbon with oversized scissors, grinning, her surgical scar barely visible. The doors opened, and people began filing inside. Raymond walked through the space, seeing state-of-the-art equipment in warm, welcoming rooms. Everything designed with patients in mind first. That evening, Raymond and Dylan walked home through the neighborhood. The same streets Raymond had walked 6 months ago, exhausted and defeated, now felt full of possibility. Dylan skipped ahead, then ran back. Dad, can I come to the clinic after school sometimes? I want to see you help people. Raymond smiled, ruffling his son's hair. I'd like that, buddy. They stopped at the corner store, and Raymond bought ice cream. They sat on the bench at the bus stop, eating as the sun set. The same bench where Raymond had sat watching the bus leave without him, wondering how he'd feed his son on $12. Dad? Dylan's voice was thoughtful. Mrs. Peterson says you're a hero because you help people even when it's hard. Is that true? Raymond considered carefully. Being a hero isn't about doing something once when everyone's watching. It's about doing the right thing consistently, even when no one notices, even when it costs you. So I don't know if I'm a hero, but I'm trying to be a good doctor and a good dad. That's enough for me. Dylan nodded, satisfied, and returned to his ice cream. Raymond watched his son, this incredible kid who'd believed in his father even when that father was walking home, fired and broke. Everything Raymond had done, every choice he'd made, it all came back to this moment, sitting on a bench with his son, eating ice cream as the day faded. The clinic opened for full operations the following Monday. Raymond's first patient was Mrs. Patterson. She'd recovered well, but needed follow-up care her insurance wouldn't cover. Raymond examined her carefully, adjusted her medications, scheduled regular monitoring, all at no cost. She held his hand as she left, tears in her eyes. You saved my life twice now, Dr. Clark. Thank you. The weeks established a rhythm. Long days at the clinic seeing patients who ranged from uninsured immigrants to working families priced out of traditional healthcare. Evenings with Dylan, helping with homework, making dinner together. The clinic ran on a mixed model, accepting insurance when patients had it, offering sliding scale fees, providing free care when necessary. Somehow, it worked. 3 months after opening, a resident called. Dr. Clark, we have a case. 17-year-old with traumatic brain injury. Family has no insurance. Our administration is pushing to transfer him, but transport could kill him. Can you help? Raymond didn't hesitate. Send me his scans. If we can stabilize him, bring him here. If not, I'll come there. The pattern repeated. Complex cases other facilities wouldn't touch found their way to Clark Community Neurosurgery. Raymond's success rate was extraordinary, not because he was a miracle worker, but because he approached each case with complete focus on saving the patient rather than protecting the bottom line. A year later, Raymond stood at Dylan's school science fair, watching his son present his project on the human brain. Dylan had built a model showing how neurosurgery worked, complete with tiny instruments. His presentation was confident, informed, proud. After the presentation, walking to the car, Dylan said, "Dad, I think I want to be a neurosurgeon like you." Raymond stopped, kneeling to look his son in the eyes. "Then you need to understand something important. Being a neurosurgeon isn't about the title or money. It's about serving people at their most vulnerable moments. It's about making hard choices and living with consequences. It's about putting patients first, even when the world tells you that's foolish. If you can commit to that, really commit, then I'll be proud to have you follow this path." Dylan nodded solemnly. "Like you do. Like when you walked all that way because you wouldn't spend my dinner money. Like when you helped that girl even though you were tired. Like how you help people at the clinic even when they can't pay." The boy's understanding made Raymond's eyes sting. "Yes, buddy, exactly like that." 2 years after opening, the clinic had served over 3,000 patients. Melissa Wheeler, now 15, volunteered there on weekends. Governor Wheeler visited monthly, watching with satisfaction as his investment created ripples of change. Other physicians, inspired by the model, began similar clinics in different cities. The idea that medicine could prioritize healing over profit began spreading. Raymond still walked to work sometimes, enjoying the quiet reflection. The route took him past the street where the helicopters had landed. Sometimes he paused there, remembering the cardboard box falling from his hands, the governor kneeling, the moment his life pivoted from despair to possibility. Those moments felt both distant and immediate, a reminder of how quickly everything could change. One evening, finishing late after a complicated surgery, Raymond found a message on his phone from an unknown number. "Dr. Clark, 3 years ago, my husband was homeless and dying from a brain hemorrhage on 5th Street. No hospital would take him, but a young doctor stopped and saved his life with whatever tools he had. That doctor changed everything for us. My husband got clean, got a job, and we built a life together. We have a daughter now. I'm calling because I realized that young doctor was you. I wanted to say thank you for seeing my husband as worth saving when everyone else saw him as worthless." Raymond stood in the empty clinic, listening 3 times. He didn't remember the specific case. It had been over 10 years ago, during his residency. But knowing that choice had created ripples, had changed lives in ways he'd never known, filled him with profound purpose. This was why the long walks mattered, why principles mattered, why refusing to compromise mattered. Because every patient was someone's husband, daughter, father, son. Raymond looked around the clinic, the examination rooms where miracles happened daily, the surgical suite where the impossible became possible, the waiting room where hope replaced despair. He thought about the path that had led here, from being fired to helicopters, landing to this moment of quiet reflection. Every hardship, every sacrifice, every painful step of that 10-mile walk had been necessary, had been worth it. His phone buzzed. Dylan, texting to ask when he'd be home. Raymond smiled and replied, "On my way now. 20 minutes. Love you." He locked up the clinic and stepped outside. The walk home would take 15 minutes through familiar streets, past houses where some of his patients lived, through a neighborhood that had become his community. As Raymond walked, he passed the corner store where he'd stood, calculating whether to buy water or save money for Dylan's dinner. The memory felt like it belonged to a different person. But that person had been him. That desperate fired doctor walking 10 miles had been the same person who now walked these streets as director of a clinic that changed lives. The difference wasn't in who he was, but in being given the opportunity to be who he'd always been, without punishment. Dylan was waiting at the window when Raymond arrived. The boy raced to the door, greeting his father with a hug that never got old. They made dinner together. Actual dinner, not survival meals. Spaghetti with meatballs, just like Raymond had promised 2 years ago. As they cooked, Dylan talked about his day, about a test he'd aced, about a friend who needed help with math. After dinner, they did homework together at the kitchen table, Dylan working through algebra, while Raymond reviewed patient charts. The companionable silence felt like everything Raymond had fought for, not wealth or prestige, but simply the ability to be present for his son while doing work that mattered. When Dylan finished, he looked up. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Always, buddy. Do you ever wish things had been easier? Like, if they hadn't fired you? If you just kept that job and we'd had more money?" Raymond set down his charts. "Sometimes I wish we'd had an easier path, but I don't wish I'd made different choices. Because those choices, standing up for patients, refusing to compromise, walking those 10 miles, those choices made us who we are. They led to the clinic. They led to helping thousands of people. So no, I don't wish things had been easier. I'm grateful they were exactly as hard as they needed to be." Dylan nodded, processing this wisdom. "I'm glad too, because you're the best dad, and you help so many people, and that's what matters." Simple words from a 10-year-old, carrying the weight of truth. Raymond reached across the table and squeezed his son's hand. "Thank you, Dylan. That means everything to me." Later, after Dylan was asleep, Raymond stood looking at the refrigerator covered with his son's artwork and photos. One photo caught his attention, taken at the clinic's opening, showing Raymond and Dylan in front of the "No Patient Turned Away" sign. In that photo, Raymond's face showed exhaustion and hope in equal measure. Dylan stood beside him, grinning with pride. Raymond's mind drifted back to that afternoon, walking through scorching heat with $12 and a cardboard box. He'd felt like a failure then. But that moment had been the beginning, not the end. The moment when principles cost everything was also the moment when they proved their worth. The phone rang, the emergency line. Raymond answered immediately. "Dr. Clark." The voice was calm but urgent. "Doctor, we have an emergency case incoming. 58-year-old male, construction accident, severe head trauma, no insurance. They've already been turned away from 2 hospitals." Raymond was already moving, grabbing his keys. "I'll be there in 10 minutes. Prep or 2. He left a note for Dylan, checked that the boy was sleeping soundly, and locked the door. The drive took 8 minutes. Emergency lights already flashed when he arrived, paramedics unloading a gurney. Raymond met them at the door, falling into step, asking rapid-fire questions about vitals, injuries, timing. The familiar rhythm of emergency medicine flowed through him. In the operating room, scrubbed and gowned, Raymond stood over another patient who needed saving. Another person whose life had value regardless of their ability to pay. Another opportunity to practice medicine the way it was meant to be practiced. His hands moved with practiced precision, giving this stranger a fighting chance. 5 hours later, the surgery complete and the patient stable, Raymond sat in his office watching the sun rise. Another life saved. Another family that wouldn't grieve. Another person given a second chance. The exhaustion was bone deep, but so was the satisfaction. Raymond thought about Governor Wheeler, about Melissa who'd recovered completely and was now in medical school, about Mrs. Patterson who'd lived to see her grandchildren graduate, about all the patients who'd passed through the clinic's doors. He'd been privileged to intersect with those stories, to make a difference when difference mattered most. The memory of those helicopters descending, the impossible rescue, the surgery that changed everything, those moments had become legend. But Raymond knew the truth. The real moment that mattered hadn't been the dramatic rescue. It had been the decision to walk 10 miles rather than spend Dylan's dinner money, the decision to save Mrs. Patterson despite consequences, the decision to never compromise on what mattered most. Those quiet moments of principle had paved the way for everything that followed. As the sun climbed higher, Raymond finally allowed himself to leave, to drive home, to slip quietly into his apartment and check on Dylan still sleeping. He stood in the doorway watching the boy breathe, feeling overwhelming gratitude for this life they'd built together. Not easy, never easy, but meaningful, important, true. Raymond made coffee and sat at the kitchen table. The normalcy of the morning routine felt precious. When Dylan emerged an hour later, rubbing sleep from his eyes, Raymond had breakfast ready, and a smile despite his exhaustion. They ate together, talking about the day ahead, about Dylan's upcoming baseball game, about normal, beautiful, everyday things that constituted a life well lived. The months continued their rhythm: surgeries, consultations, emergencies. Dylan grew taller, more confident, more certain of his path toward medicine. The clinic expanded, adding a second surgical suite. More physicians joined, attracted by the mission and freedom to practice medicine without corporate interference. The model proved sustainable, profitable enough to ensure competitive salaries while maintaining the no patient turned away policy. On the second anniversary of the clinic's opening, a celebration was held. Hundreds of former patients attended, people whose lives had been saved or improved. Melissa Wheeler gave a speech about second chances. Governor Wheeler announced additional funding to replicate the clinic model in other underserved areas. Raymond stood at the back, watching Dylan help organize the celebration, seeing his son interact easily with patients from all walks of life. This was the education that mattered, understanding that every person deserved dignity and care, regardless of circumstances. Dylan was learning through lived experience, watching his father practice what he preached. As the celebration wound down, an elderly man approached Raymond. "Dr. Clark, I don't know if you remember me. My wife, Mrs. Patterson. You operated on her 2 years ago. The surgery that got you fired." Raymond remembered. The man continued, voice thick with emotion. "I wanted you to know that Martha passed away last month, peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by family. But she lived 2 more years because of you. 2 years to see her grandchildren grow, to celebrate our 50th anniversary. You gave us that gift." Martha's last words to me were that Dr. Clark was an angel. He sacrificed everything to save me. I'll watch over him and his boy from heaven. Raymond felt tears blur his vision as the man clasped his hand. After he left, Raymond stood alone thinking about Mrs. Patterson, about the surgery that ended one chapter and began another, about how one decision rippled through so many lives. The cost had been high, but the worth was immeasurable. Dylan found him there. "Dad? You okay?" Raymond pulled his son into a hug. "Yeah, buddy. I'm really okay." They locked up together and walked home, the same streets, the same route, but everything transformed by time and choices that had somehow worked out right. In the years that followed, Raymond's story became a case study in medical schools, an example of principled practice in corporate healthcare. But Raymond remained focused on the work, the next patient, the next surgery, the next life that needed saving. Dylan graduated high school with honors, accepted to multiple universities with pre-med programs. The clinic continued thriving, serving thousands while maintaining its mission. Melissa Wheeler completed medical school and chose neurosurgery, requesting Raymond as her mentor. The hypothermic reconstruction technique became standard protocol. The model of community-based, patient-first healthcare spread to other cities, and sometimes, when Raymond walked home from the clinic, he remembered that scorching afternoon when everything fell apart and came together simultaneously. When helicopters landed and someone shouted his name and a governor knelt in the street. when the cost of principles became their validation, when the hardest walk of his life led to the most meaningful destination. The cardboard box from that day sat on a shelf in his office. Inside it, the same photo of Dylan, the same letter from Lisa, the same thank you cards. And now, added to the collection, thousands of stories, lives saved, families preserved, hope restored. Not because of helicopters or dramatic rescues, but because someone chose to keep fighting for what mattered, even when that fight seemed impossible. Raymond Clark never became wealthy or famous in the traditional sense. But he built something that mattered, raised a son who understood the value of service, and practiced medicine the way it was meant to be practiced. In the end, that was enough. That was everything. And on quiet evenings, sitting with Dylan reviewing patient charts or discussing surgical techniques, Raymond sometimes caught himself smiling. Not because the path had been easy, it never was, but because every hard step had been worth it. Every sacrifice had meaning. Every choice to do the right thing had rippled outward in ways that changed the world, one patient at a time. The question Governor Wheeler had asked that first night, what changed, had a simple answer. Nothing had changed. Raymond had always been this doctor, this father, this man committed to principles over profit. The world had simply given him a chance to prove it. That was the real miracle, not the surgery or rescue or dramatic moment. The miracle was that caring about people, about healing, about doing right, that those things still mattered, still had power, still could change everything. And late at night, when the clinic was quiet and Dylan was sleeping, Raymond sometimes stood at the window thinking about all the patients yet to come, all the lives still waiting to be saved. This was his life's work. This was his legacy. This was why he'd walked 10 miles with $12 in his pocket. This was why principles mattered. This was why the fight was always, always worth it.